Hey everyone, Larissa here from Beekeeping Made Simple, and this video is about the push cage. I will try to do one a little bit more formally pre-recorded, but for now I wanted to do this real fast because this is an important time that you might be needing to introduce a new queen to a hive. And this is what a push cage is. Nothing fancy, definitely not the prettiest looking thing I've ever seen. And for those of you that are maybe new at this, a push cage isn't something you need. It's not a gadget you have to buy. It's not necessary. It just makes life easier. So if you want to give it a shot, I recommend it. Now, how it works is you take the queen bee out of this cage and you let her, you don't take her out. You open up the door and let her walk out into this cage. So here, I'm going to grab a frame of comb for you real fast. Okay, so you have a queen bee and you need to put her into a hive she does not come from. These bees don't know her and they need to get used to her pheromones, so she is caged. And you can put this cage in there and you can just take out the one cork and let them eat the candy, or you can take the cork out manually when you think they're ready. But what I like to do, and I've never actually had a problem with this, is use a push cage. So what you do is you find a frame that has capped brood. Emerging capped brood specifically. And if you're not sure if it's capped, if they're going to be emerging or not, like, how are you supposed to know that? If you see a frame with the heads of bees coming out, then they're obviously they're emerging. But the queen, she's laying in a pattern. They say it's in a spiral, but she lays an egg, an egg, an egg, an egg, an egg. So if you have capped brood here, then you're going to start to see like open cells, say here. So this is going to be the oldest capped brood, and this will, the closer you get to the open cells, is going to be the younger capped brood. But if you can find capped brood with some bees popping out already, actually hatching, or if you can find capped brood that has empty cells, because the only time you're going to have empty cells within the capped brood section is if they just hatched, or if if you have like a queen that's not laying in a spotty pattern, but that's like the sign of a weak queen, and I wouldn't worry about that too much. It's probably not the case for you. Or there's larvae in there. There's larvae in there, they'll be real big, and so you'll be able to see them really easily. So you want to find a section with the capped brood, with the bees coming out, or maybe some empty cells. And then usually on your frame, you're going to have like that rainbow shape, that little arch up at the top and on the sides of honey. So you want to put your push cage in a section of your capped brood frame that has emerging brood, but it also has a little bit of honey. And you're going to push it in there a little bit. If you can have an assistant to help you with this, it's always helpful because 4 hands are way better than 2. And you're going to push it in a little bit. So you're going to have one side that's going to have like a little flap opening, and you're going to want to open up the little flap. And I'll explain later how you make one of these things. But you're going to have your queen cage, and you're going to take the end that just has a cork, no candy, pull that cork out, and then very quickly put the opening of that cork where you have the opening of your push cage. So like right here, I have this little opening right here in my cage. And as soon as you open this thing, the queen is usually pretty fast to get running out of there. She does not want to be in that cage. She's usually, pacing and pacing, trying to find her way out. And you don't want there to be any bees on the frame, in the cage, when you're letting the queen out. That part can be a little tricky, and that's where having an extra set of hands especially, or someone to just hold it while you do this, comes in handy, because you want just the queen. Now, when I buy queens, is one of the great things about living here in Kona is we have queen breeders like everywhere. I bumped into a queen breeder at a post office, and now he meets me down the street. We happen to live on the same street, so he meets me down the road. I text him when I need a queen bee. He'll give them to me real fast, but my queen bees don't come with any attendants. So that's why it's especially important that I look for emerging brood, especially bees that are coming out of the cells while I'm looking at the frame. But if your cage has attendants in there with the queen, it's not so important that you find like brood that's emerging that day. So you're putting the push cage on that frame where you have the emerging brood and a little bit of food. And then you let the queen walk into that little part, and you close it up and you push it down really hard so that this thing doesn't fall out. So the queen is stuck in this thing walking around as opposed to this thing. The emerging brood will pop out and they will start to tend to the queen. They don't care who she is. They don't know that she's not the queen that's been in their hive for the last year or so. And there's food. It's really important that you put it on a section with food. And so that is the push cage. Now, I don't use foundation. So what happens every time for me, well, not every time, but for the larger, medium to larger hives, you know, the hives that are like at least one brood box, the bees will chew through the honeycomb on the other side and get to her and release her. And the smaller hives, usually I have to go in and pull the push cage out. And if you do use foundation, most likely you'll have to pull the push cage out and release the queen. I found that this works every single time. Sometimes I've seen bees ball their queen, the queen that I've tried to introduce to them. And see, what I like about the push cage is that the queen can start laying eggs. She's not confined into this little box and then getting really slim. So she can start laying. Her pheromones, are probably being like dissipated within the hive and reaching the hive way better in this thing rather than in this wooden box with just this tiny little screen. So the bees I found take to her a lot faster in the push cage. She's already laying, so you don't have that downtime when she gets out of the cage before her ovaries start, producing eggs again. And that's also good for the beekeeper because, when you release her from the cage, I don't know if this ever happened to you, but I've, over the years, I've had I feel like every problem happened when releasing a queen. And one time the queen just flew away. She just and I had it down in the hive and stuff, and she walked out onto the top bar and just flew away. But with the push cage, she's got all this space to start walking around and laying. So she's a little bit heavier, so it will be harder for her to fly away, and a lot less likely for her to fly away because she's just walking around on the frame already. And the bees take to her a whole lot faster. Okay, so the push cage, my craft is terrible, really. I'm never really bragged about. I can't cut in a straight line with scissors. So carpenters and stuff might be shaking their head whenever they look at my beekeeping equipment. But all this thing is just a piece of hardware cloth that's a square. I believe it's number 8 hardware cloth. I bought it years ago, and it's really handy because the holes are big enough that the bees can't get through it, but the small hive beetle fall through, so you can make screened bottom boards. It is 1/8 of an inch are the holes, the size of the holes in between. But really, for the push cage, all you need is hardware cloth that is, the holes are small enough that the bees can't squeeze in there. But, other things. Pull this out of the shed, and there's bugs crawling on me. So what you do is you cut a square out of your hardware cloth. Let's see, I made this 5 by 5. It's really not crucial that it be these exact measurements. So you have the square, and then you're going to want the push cage to be, I have mine at about 1 inch in depth or height. And that's because you're going to push this down into your comb. So you want it to be at least an inch so that you get it in the comb, squished down, but there's also room for the queen to be actually walking around and she's not like, squished under the hardware cloth. So you can just fold in the sides of your hardware cloth just to get a gauge of where your cuts are going to be. And then you're going to make 4 cuts. So on each side, you're just going to make a cut, like, I guess, it's about 3/4, about an inch, since it's an inch in depth. So I just did an inch in and an inch down. And I'll try to do another video where I maybe like, record it in advance so that I can do some illustrations for you. But it's pretty simple in concept. You're just doing an inch in and an inch down. You're going to make a flap on one side so that you can fold it down and fold it over. See, like that. So you're essentially making a box, but it doesn't have that one side. And to keep it closed, I just took a staple and folded it over, or if you have like a heavier duty stapler, you just staple it. The thing is that you just want one side that you're going to cut an extra piece into, and that's because you have this gate you need to make, so that when you have the hole, you open up your queen cage, you're just going to lead the hole into the push cage so that the queen walks out of the cage she's in and into the push cage. And I found that she really quickly does this, but it kind of depends. I believe usually this way she prefers to go, or you can hold it horizontally. See what floats her boat and what makes her happy and what encourages her to get out of there. Be a little bit patient with her. It might take her a few minutes. And if there are any bees in that cage with her, let them follow her in. So then once she gets in there into your cage, then you can fold it over and squish it into the wax. And the wax is, so soft and squishy. If you're concerned that it's going to open up or anything, you can take little, get these little bits of wax somewhere else on your frame, and you can just mold it around your cage so that you're keeping that gate shut. And that's it. Now, there are different ways that you can introduce a queen to a hive. If, say, your hive has a queen and she's not doing well, or maybe it's just always been a dud hive and they're not going to make it through the winter at this rate. So it's better to requeen when they have an opportunity to breed, to bring in some honey and to do something before the winter time comes, rather than pack up this hive for winter and just have it not survive the winter. So say you're going to pinch your queen. It means like you're kind of chopping off her head and you want to introduce a new queen. When I worked for like commercial apiaries, they they just chopped off the head, stuck in a queen cage. That was it. And that is a way you can do it. Their queens were free. They had a deal with the queen breeder. So it wasn't like, $35 could potentially be going down the tubes if you do it that way. Their success rate, who knows what it was. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. So if you're, just have a couple of hives and you want your success rate to be like 100%, because that's, $35, maybe $40 or something for a queen. What I recommend doing, this is what I do, is I will pinch the queen and leave the hive queenless for like about 5 days or so. Enough time that when I go back in, I can find easily all of the queen cells that they're making. Because if you introduce a queen to a hive that's already making a queen, most of the time they will not accept her. It doesn't matter that she's ready to go and laying eggs, and it makes a whole lot of sense to just take the queen you have instead of try your luck with one that hasn't hatched yet and hasn't made it or anything. But that's what they do. So I leave them for enough time that any of the eggs and young larvae that they decide to try to make into a queen, I can easily find those queen cells, take every single brood frame and shake the bees off of the frame back into the hive and look for the queen cells. You don't want to just like look for the queen cells with the bees on it, unless there's like, not very many bees in your hive. You really want to take the bees off and do a really thorough look. And if some of the queen cells are still really small and you're not sure, you can wait a couple more days to, wait till the queen cells are large and then pinch them all. And then since they don't have a queen in their hive anymore, they're not going to be able to make more because there's no more eggs or young larvae to make a queen from. So then that's when you can introduce a queen to the hive, and you don't have to worry about them not accepting her because they're in the process of making a queen. I've had students, try to do this, but they couldn't find their queen, and that's, that's not going to work out well. So I recommend the push cage because I've never had this fail. I have had bees, queens in cages in the hive for like over a week, and they still just aren't accepting her. They're still trying to ball her. You can take a blade of grass or lightly blow on the cage, and if the bees get out of the way easily, usually that means that they're okay with her. But if they're still biting at it, that means they're not. And you can take a spray bottle with those essential oils like the Honeybee Healthy mixed with water, sugar water, and spray that on the frames, and that will help get rid of the pheromones from the old queen and help them accept the new queen. But if you have hardware cloth, I recommend making one of these things and giving it a try. And then I have a question. It says, you said that the bees will chew through the frame wall to release the queen. Is that timing similar to what you would release her from anyway, or different? It's usually faster. The bees usually will release her a lot faster from, they can release her and accept her a lot faster. I found that the bees, I'll go back in 3 days and she's out and she's walking around and she looks like she's been there forever. And with this cage, I have to manually release her, and I don't allow them to just eat the candy cork and for them to release her. I've had way too many times that they've done this and killed her. So I use this way, and especially if timing is not on your side and your hive is really just like suffering and they need eggs now, and you don't have another hive with excess eggs or brood or whatever you need. The push cage really makes things faster. And I just hate seeing the queen just pacing in this thing. The fact that she can start laying eggs and eating honey it just makes me feel better about putting her in a hive this way. But yeah, if you don't have foundation like I don't, they will chew through the wax and get to her. And I've had some pretty large hives, that are 2 deep brood boxes and probably over 50,000 bees that have released their queen in just a couple of days, and they accepted her. And I've always been so surprised at how it just works every time. So yeah, this works most of the time. But if you're ever afraid of her flying away when you release her from this cage and things of that, then I recommend this. This doesn't require holding the queen. It doesn't require having to manipulate her in any way. You're really just opening up your little gate. You see the little hole I have there is my gate, so then I shut it. And then you're opening up the cork, the end that doesn't have the candy in it, and you're just putting it so that the opening goes straight into the hole for the gate, so that the queen goes straight from one place to the next. And this is also pushed down in the wax a little bit, so there's less room for her to get out. She really just goes from one to the next, and it works pretty well. But yeah, if you could have someone with you, or just a way to lay your frame flat down on the beehive, it's a lot easier so that you're not having to hold the frame and hold your cage and stuff. But you don't have to like pick up the queen or move her around, pick her up by the wings, or do any of that sort with this. The push cage, I actually think that you do less. And then another question is the 3-hole cages. I get quoted 30% fail rate, and that's high. So when I hear this option, yeah, I don't know what the 3-hole cages are. Is that this thing? Is that like this guy? I guess I don't really know why this hole looks like a snowman. 30% is terrible. That's terrible. Like, I only pay $20 for a queen because the guy is just dropping them, meeting me at the grocery store down the street. But I think other people are like paying $45 at from some of these queen breeders, or having them shipped to them. And you don't want, if it doesn't work, you can't just buy another queen and have it shipped to you and wait all of that time. So I would try this. I was really leery of trying it at first, and then it worked. And I talked to a friend who has a queen breeding business, and he agreed with me that it is actually a really great way to introduce a queen to a hive. Now, the absolute easiest way to introduce a queen to a hive is if you let a hive that's really strong, that has really good genetics, is dealing with mites and all of the things that you're looking for in a beehive. They're doing really well, and you want to make some splits and increase the amount of hives in your yard, especially going into winter time. You're going to want to go into winter with more hives, so that come spring, you have a greater chance of having some still there. So you want to breed from this hive that's doing well. You let that hive make queen cells, and then you can put the actual queen cell. You can actually cut the queen cell out of the frame of brood if you're not using foundation, and pop that in. Now, that is the absolute easiest way to introduce a queen to your hive. She does have to go out and mate, so it's not a no-fail rate. But I've never had any problems with this, so I highly recommend you guys give it a shot. And if anyone's tried this, I'd love to hear. The reason why I did this live before I do a more formal video is because I'd love to hear if anyone has any more questions, or has tried this and it worked or didn't work for them. Because it's not something that I hear a lot of people talking about, but it makes life a lot easier. So I'd love to hear from you. Maybe your success rate is a little bit better. Well, it can be better, but it could be worse. So let me know. Thanks for watching. Bye.